What if cinema could read your mind? What if one director could turn your fears, secrets, and obsessions? Alfred Hitchcock didn't just make movies. He engineered psychological roller coasters that still haunt us decades later. In this deep dive, we reveal the greatest films from the master of suspense. From spiraling staircases to sinister motel rooms, buckle up. You're about to enter Hitchcock's shadowy universe. Psycho, 1960. It begins with a woman and stolen money. It ends with a shower, a scream, and a face you'll never forget. Psycho isn't just Alfred Hitchcock's most iconic film, it's his most ruthless reinvention of cinema itself. At the time, Hollywood had rules. Don't kill the lead early, don't show too much violence. He bought the rights to Robert Bloch's novel anonymously, paid just $9,000, and used his Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV crew to keep costs low. Because the studios didn't believe in it, he had to fund it himself. And yet, Psycho became a phenomenon. People lined up around the block, but no one was allowed in after the movie started. Anthony Perkins wasn't the obvious choice for Norman Bates. He was a clean-cut heartthrob, but Hitchcock wanted that. He needed the audience to like Norman before twisting the knife. Perkins brought something unexpected, a twitchy charm, a boyish guilt that made Norman strangely sympathetic. And Janet Leigh, she was the star. She drew people in. But 40 minutes in, she was gone in one of cinema's most brutal rug pulls. That shower scene, it's 45 seconds, 78 shots, and the stabbing never actually shows a blade-piercing skin. It's all editing, suggestion, and Bernard Herrmann's screeching violins, an idea Hitchcock originally rejected until he heard the score. The ending, with its monologue about Norman and Mother, has been debated for decades. Some find it clinical, others chilling. But what matters most is what came before, the slow descent into madness, the house on the hill, and the realization that evil can wear a boyish grin. Behind the curtain, Psycho is about control. Hitchcock didn't just direct a movie, he orchestrated an experience. From the lobby posters to the final credits, he wanted to shape your fear, and he did. Vertigo, 1958. Vertigo isn't just a film, it's a descent. A slow, spiraling plunge into the psyche of a broken man, and Hitchcock's most personal, tragic, and ambitious work. It stars James Stewart as Scotty, a detective forced into early retirement after a traumatic rooftop chase leaves him with crippling acrophobia. When an old friend asks him to follow his wife, Madeline, Kim Novak, everything in Vertigo feels haunted by time, by memory. Kim Novak, originally not Hitchcock's first choice, he wanted Vera Miles, plays both Madeleine and Judy, and her performance is a masterclass in duality. Ethereal and enigmatic as Madeleine, raw and desperate as Judy. The film's infamous dolly zoom, a camera move that simultaneously pulls back while zooming in, was invented for this movie to visualize Scotty's vertigo. It's not just a trick. It's the feeling of the floor dropping beneath your feet. When the truth is revealed that Judy was impersonating Madeleine all along, he becomes a sculptor, molding Judy into Madeleine again, forcing her to relive a lie just so he can recapture a fantasy. And when she finally dons the gray suit and blonde hair, rising from the green-lit haze of a hotel room, it's cinematic hypnosis. Audiences weren't ready for a romantic thriller with no clear villain, a damaged protagonist, and a love story that ends with death. In 2012, it unseated Citizen Kane as the greatest film of all time on Sight and Sound's critics' poll. Many now read Vertigo as Hitchcock's confession. In Vertigo, that obsession leads to ruin. It's his most naked film, his most devastating. And that final shot, Scotty staring into the void with no more illusions left, may be the loneliest moment in all of cinema. Rear Window, 1954. With a broken leg and a camera, L.B. Jeffries sees everything, except the truth about himself. Rear Window is Hitchcock's meditation on voyeurism, loneliness, and what it means to truly see. Jeffries, James Stewart, is stuck in his apartment during a sweltering New York summer. His only escape is the window across his courtyard, where the lives of his neighbors play out like silent films. There's the ballerina, the newlyweds, the lonely songwriter, and the couple who sleep on their fire escape. Then there's Thorwald, the man with the curtain drawn too often, the wife who disappears. Jeff watches obsessively, but his real struggle is with Lisa, Grace Kelly, his stunning girlfriend who wants more than a weekend fling. But as the murder mystery deepens, Lisa becomes the hero, climbing into Thorwald's apartment, risking her life to prove Jeff right. The genius of Rear Window is its restriction. Hitchcock shot the entire film from Jeff's perspective, using a massive, custom-built set with real apartments. You never leave his view. When he watches, you watch. When he doubts, you doubt. Lisa's transformation, from society girl to fearless investigator, mirrors Jeff's own emotional awakening. But the moral dilemma lingers. Is Jeff solving a murder or feeding an addiction to watching others suffer? Are we, the audience, complicit in that gaze? It's when Thorwald turns and looks back. The watcher becomes the watched. And in that moment, the illusion of safety shatters. North by Northwest, 1959. Before Bond, before Bourne, there was Roger Thornhill, a man who was nobody, mistaken for somebody, and turned into everyone. North by Northwest is Hitchcock's most exhilarating thrill ride. But beneath the action, it's a story about identity, illusion, and transformation. Cary Grant is at his wittiest and most charming here, playing Thornhill, a Madison Avenue ad man whose biggest mistake is being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suddenly, he's being hunted by spies, nearly killed at the United Nations, and pursued across the country. All for being mistaken as George Kaplan, a man who doesn't even exist. Hitchcock saw the 1950s as an era obsessed with appearances, and North by Northwest is his response. Thornhill starts as a smooth-talking phony. By the end, he's risking everything, not because he's a spy, but because he finally cares. The action set pieces are legendary. The crop duster scene in an empty field. Hitchcock stripped the score and dialogue to heighten the tension, building dread from silence and the distant whir of the approaching plane. Eva Marie Saint's Eve Kendall is one of Hitchcock's most layered heroines, sexy, deceptive, and torn between duty and love. And James Mason, with his velvet voice and subtle menace, plays the villain not as a brute. One hidden detail? Hitchcock appears near the beginning, missing a bus in the opening credits. A self-aware joke in a film that's all about missed connections. The final shot, Thornhill pulling Eve into the train bunk, cuts abruptly to the train plunging into a tunnel. He's not just giving us romance. He's giving us innuendo, closure, and a wink all at once. The Birds, 1963. The Birds was unlike anything Hitchcock had made before. There's no musical score, just silence, and the shrill sound of cawing and flapping. Tippi Hedren, in her first role, plays Melanie Daniels, a San Francisco socialite whose impulsive trip to Bodega Bay becomes a descent into chaos. What begins as flirtation with local lawyer Mitch Brenner, Rod Taylor, turns into a siege of pecking beaks and clawing talons. The attacks escalate with eerie rhythm. A bird crashes into a phone booth, another slams into a classroom window, then flocks descend on a gas station and light the town ablaze. No one knows why, and Hitchcock refuses to explain. Behind the scenes, it was a grueling shoot. Hitchcock promised Hedren mechanical birds. Real birds were hurled at her, tied to her costume, and pecked until her face bled. The final attic scene took a week to shoot. Hedren collapsed from exhaustion. That trauma, she later said, never fully healed. But the fear wasn't just from feathers. It's also about women, mothers, and psychological power plays. Look closely, and The Birds plays like a horror version of Rebecca. There's a cold mother, a strong blonde outsider, a man caught between them. And just when the emotional triangle boils over, the sky erupts. And the ending? There isn't one. Just a quiet escape. Birds everywhere. The final shot isn't violent. It's unnerving. And that's what Hitchcock wanted. Not a bang, but a whisper of dread that follows you long after the credits roll. Dial M for Murder, 1954. In Dial M for Murder, murder is choreographed like a waltz. Every step, every move, every breath is planned. But even the perfect plan can trip. And when it does, that's when Hitchcock strikes. Ray Milland plays Tony Wendis, a retired tennis player who discovers his wealthy wife Margot, Grace Kelly, is having an affair. Rather than confront her, he plots to have her murdered. He meticulously blackmails a former classmate to commit the murder, calculates her schedule down to the minute, and creates an alibi so tight it squeaks. But when Margot fights back and kills her attacker with a pair of scissors, Tony has to improvise. He alters the crime scene, frames her for murder, and watches her stand trial. The brilliance of Dial M for Murder lies in its spatial claustrophobia. Hitchcock limits the action to one apartment. Instead of wide locations or flashbacks, he turns furniture into clues, phones into weapons, and lighting into mood swings. One overlooked fact: the film was originally shot in 3D. Not for spectacle, but for subtle psychological depth. Objects like a raised key or a closing drawer practically protrude from the screen. Grace Kelly, in her first collaboration with Hitchcock, is radiant and restrained. Her reaction during the trial, silent, ashamed, confused, despite its confined setting, the film feels vast in implication. It's about manipulation, gaslighting, the illusion of safety. Hitchcock doesn't rely on surprise. He shows us the crime, then builds tension around whether it will be exposed. What if someone knew you so well they could plan your murder and make it look like justice? Rope, 1948. Rope opens with a murder and then invites you to dinner, with the body still hidden in the room. It's Hitchcock's most experimental film and one of his most sinister. Brandon and Philip, two elitist young men, murder a former classmate just to prove they can. Then they hide his body in a trunk, throw a dinner party on top of it, and invite his family, his fiancée, over, just for fun. Shot to appear as one unbroken take, the story was inspired by the real-life Leopold and Loeb case. Two wealthy young men who murdered a boy just to commit the perfect crime. Hitchcock takes that cruelty and explores its philosophical roots. Nietzschean superiority, moral detachment, suspicion. 1941. What if your husband wanted to kill you, and all you had was a feeling? Suspicion is Hitchcock's softest film in terms of pace, but one of his most psychologically unsettling. Joan Fontaine stars as Lena, a shy, bookish woman who marries the dashing but irresponsible Johnny Aysgarth, played by Cary Grant. At first, he's charming, exciting. Then come the lies, the gambling, the missing money, the whispers, and finally, the glowing glass of milk. Is Johnny trying to kill her, or is Lena's mind unraveling? Fontaine won an Oscar for her performance, the only actor to do so in a Hitchcock film. She plays Lena with fragility and rising panic, giving us a portrait of a woman crumbling beneath doubt. Hitchcock keeps us locked in her perspective. Every scene is filtered through her unease. Grant, meanwhile, plays against type. Usually the romantic lead. Here, he's ambiguous, even sinister. Hitchcock used that to his advantage, casting the audience's trust in Grant as a weapon. We want to believe he's innocent, even when the signs scream otherwise. Hitchcock originally wanted a darker ending. Johnny was a killer, and Lena realized it too late. But studio execs said no. Cary Grant had to be redeemed. So instead, the ending became a compromise. Johnny confesses not to murder, and the couple drives into an uncertain future. It's a strange resolution, unsatisfying by design, but it lingers. Look closer, and suspicion isn't really about murder. It's about gaslighting. It's about how easy it is to doubt yourself when the people around you manipulate your reality. Lena doesn't just fear Johnny. She fears her own mind. And that glass of milk? Hitchcock had a light hidden inside to make it glow. We never find out what's in it. That's the genius of suspicion. It makes you paranoid and never lets you be sure. The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956. An ordinary family, a vacation gone wrong. A conspiracy that turns a lullaby into a lifeline. The Man Who Knew Too Much is Hitchcock's most emotional thriller. A remake of his own 1934 film, but remade with deeper resonance, stronger characters, and a more mature grasp of tension. James Stewart plays Dr. Ben McKenna, a quiet American doctor traveling in Morocco with his wife Jo, Doris Day, and their young son, Hank. After witnessing the murder of a French spy, Ben and Jo find themselves caught in the gears of international espionage, and their son is kidnapped to ensure their silence. This isn't a spy story of gadgets and bravado. It's about two people utterly unprepared for what they're facing. Stewart plays Ben as a man torn between logic and emotion, while Doris Day, often typecast in musical comedies, gives a searing performance as a mother trapped in helplessness. And then there's that scene, the climax in the Royal Albert Hall, a 12-minute sequence of pure, wordless suspense. The assassin's gunshot is timed to coincide with the cymbal crash in a symphony. As Jo watches from the balcony, the music swells, and her realization dawns. It's masterful. No dialogue, just a mother's rising panic and Hitchcock's cutting. But the film's emotional crescendo is Que Sera, Sera. At first, a playful song between mother and son. By the end, it becomes her desperate cry in a foreign embassy, hoping Hank can hear her, hoping he'll respond. It's a rare moment in a Hitchcock film where sentimentality hits with full force. And it works. Behind the scenes, Hitchcock used color and costume to reflect internal changes. Jo wears bright hues in Morocco, freedom, energy, but switches to muted grays and blues in London, reflecting grief and restraint. In this film, knowledge isn't power, it's burden. The more Ben and Jo learn, the more dangerous their world becomes. They don't want to be heroes, but they become them because they must. Frenzy, 1972. In Frenzy, Hitchcock returned to London, but this time the gloves were off. This wasn't the London of foggy romance and tidy suspense. This was Covent Garden, brutal, sweaty, and soaked in blood. After a series of women are murdered by the necktie strangler, suspicion falls on Richard Blaney, a down-on-his-luck bartender. He's angry, impulsive, and worst of all, he fits the profile. But the real killer is closer than anyone thinks. Frenzy is unflinching. It was Hitchcock's first film rated R, and he used that freedom to show what he previously only suggested. The rape-murder scene is stomach-turning. The way Hitchcock frames it, cutting from the woman's corpse back to the open window, birds chirping, is devastating. But more chilling than violence is how the system fails. Blaney is arrested, beaten, locked away. Meanwhile, Rusk smiles, eats, lives. The tension builds not around if justice will be served, but when and whether it'll be too late. One unforgettable sequence, a long tracking shot, where the camera follows Rusk and his next victim into his building, then slowly backs out, down the stairs, out the door, onto the empty street. No music, no screams. Though it lacks the polish of earlier films, Frenzy is raw, honest, and deeply cynical. Hitchcock, now in his 70s, was confronting modern violence head-on. Gone were the velvet gloves. This was Hitchcock asking, the final shot, where the police finally catch Rusk, dragging a trunk of evidence, feels more like a sigh than a triumph. It's justice, yes, but it's late, bloody, damaged. And it was his last great film. A savage final statement from the master of suspense. I still know how to get under your skin. So tell us, which Hitchcock film haunted you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you learned something new, and subscribe for more hidden gems, behind-the-scenes secrets, and deep dives into film history.